Michael Steele was once a decorated Delta Force commander, renowned for his bravery and leadership. He had led his team through the most dangerous missions across the globe, saving countless lives along the way. But his world came crashing down when he was falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit. Framed by a powerful conspiracy, Michael found himself behind bars, betrayed by the very system he had once fought to protect. His arrest was swift, and the charges against him were severe. No one listened to his pleas of innocence. His record, his reputation, and his service to his country were meaningless now. He was just another prisoner, locked away with the rest of the world's forgotten. But Michael wasn't like the other prisoners. He knew how to survive in the most hostile of environments, and he would fight tooth and nail to prove his innocence. But the prison was a dangerous place, one ruled by gangs and corruption. The Black Talons, the most feared gang in the facility, quickly took notice of Michael. Led by the ruthless Drake, the Black Talons controlled every aspect of the prison, from the guards to the underground activities. Michael knew that if he didn't find a way out, he would never see the light of day again. He needed to stay alive long enough to clear his name. As days turned into weeks, Michael endured brutal assaults and psychological torment from the Black Talons. He fought back with every ounce of his military training, but he knew it wasn't enough. The walls of the prison were closing in on him, and the truth seemed further away with each passing day. He had to find a way to break free, but in order to do so, he would need allies, and he would need to learn who had framed him. As Michael's days in prison dragged on, he began to feel the weight of isolation bearing down on him. He was not a man used to sitting idle. His mind was always calculating, always strategizing, but the prison walls were a constant reminder of his helplessness, and the days blurred together in an endless cycle of violence and uncertainty. Then, one day, everything changed. A new face arrived at the prison, a woman, tall and confident, with a determined glint in her eye. Her name was Jessica Green, a sharp and resourceful investigator with ties to powerful organizations. Michael had never met her before, but he had heard of her through whispers in the criminal underworld. She was known for taking on impossible cases and exposing corruption at the highest levels. Jessica had been hired by Michael's old military contacts, those who still believed in his innocence. She had one mission: to clear his name and bring down the corrupt individuals who had framed him. Michael was skeptical at first. He had been betrayed by the very system he had served, and trust was something he no longer took lightly. But there was something about Jessica that piqued his interest, her unwavering determination. The way she carried herself with a quiet strength that reminded him of his own resolve. Their first meeting was brief, but it left a lasting impression on Michael. Jessica walked into the visitation room with a sense of purpose, her posture straight, her eyes focused. She introduced herself and wasted no time getting to the point. "I'm here to help you, Michael," she said. "I know you're innocent. I'll prove it." It was a simple statement, but it was the first time in months that Michael had heard someone say those words with conviction. He looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of doubt, but there was none. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for him to clear his name. After their first meeting, Jessica wasted no time. She began her investigation immediately. Combing through Michael's case with the precision of a surgeon, she requested all the documents, the police reports, and every scrap of evidence that had been used to convict him. What she uncovered shocked her. The case against Michael was built on lies, planted evidence, and false testimonies from people who had been bought off. Jessica wasn't just dealing with a few crooked cops. She was up against a network of corruption that reached into the very heart of the system. The deeper she dug, the more she realized that Michael's case was only the tip of the iceberg. There were others involved, people in positions of power who had used their influence to silence anyone who got in their way. She had a breakthrough when she discovered the involvement of a powerful businessman named Marcus Foster. Marcus was known for his shady dealings, but nothing had ever been proven against him. As Jessica examined the files, she found evidence that Foster was not only behind Michael's wrongful conviction but was also using his wealth to control the legal system and law enforcement. It wasn't just about revenge for Jessica, this was about justice. She knew that to take down Foster, she would have to dismantle his entire operation, piece by piece, but as she stared at the mountain of evidence in front of her, she knew it wouldn't be easy. Foster was too powerful, and his reach was vast. Still, Jessica was undeterred. She had made a promise to Michael, and she intended to keep it. She began reaching out to trusted sources within law enforcement and the legal community, trying to gather more information that would lead her to Foster's weak points. But time was running out, and she knew that if she didn't act fast, Michael's life would continue to be in danger. As Jessica continued to dig into Marcus Foster's dealings, she uncovered more and more dark secrets hidden in plain sight. One evening, while she was sifting through a batch of newly obtained financial records, something caught her attention. A name, Garrett Lang. Garrett Lang was a contractor working for Foster's various development projects. His reputation was murky at best, but no one had ever been able to tie him to anything criminal. At least not publicly. Jessica's heart raced as she cross-referenced his name with others connected to the case. There it was. Lang had been linked to several questionable payments that were traced directly back to Marcus Foster's personal accounts. This was the break she needed. Jessica knew that to bring Foster down, she had to go after his people first. And Garrett Lang seemed like the perfect starting point. She spent the next few days tracking Lang's whereabouts, speaking with informants, and trying to gather information on his activities. Finally, she tracked him to a warehouse on the outskirts of town. An old building that had once been a hub for illegal activities but was now used by Lang for his security business. Armed with new intel, Jessica knew she had to act fast. She contacted Michael, who was still staying in a safe house, and informed him about her plan. Michael, ever the soldier, was ready to move. He agreed to meet her at the warehouse that night. They would confront Lang together, hoping to get the information they needed to take down Foster once and for all. As night fell, Jessica and Michael approached the warehouse cautiously. They knew they were walking into danger, but neither of them hesitated. They had come too far to turn back now. Inside the dimly lit building, the tension was palpable. Jessica's heart pounded in her chest as they slowly made their way toward the back office where Garrett Lang was said to be working. The warehouse was eerily quiet, its vast space filled with the faint hum of machinery and the rustle of papers. Jessica and Michael moved with purpose, each step taken carefully and with precision. The old building smelled of oil and dust, the remnants of years gone by. Their footsteps echoed softly as they approached the back office. The door was ajar, and through the crack, they could see Garrett Lang sitting behind a desk, flipping through a set of documents. He looked up suddenly, his eyes narrowing as he sensed something was off. But before he could react, Michael and Jessica were already inside, blocking his only escape. "Garrett Lang," Jessica said, her voice calm but firm. "We need to talk." Lang stood up slowly, his eyes darting between the two of them. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low but tinged with fear. "Who are you people?" "You work for Marcus Foster," Michael replied, his tone unwavering. "We know what you've been doing. We know about the bribes, the laundering, and the hit you orchestrated on me. Now you're going to tell us everything, or we'll make you." Lang backed away slightly, but his bravado quickly faded. He was cornered, and he knew it. "I don't know anything," he stammered, his hands shaking. "I'm just a contractor. I don't know about any of this." Jessica took a step forward, her gaze never leaving his. "You're not fooling anyone. We've got all the evidence we need. All we want is the truth. What's Foster planning next?" Lang's eyes flickered to the door, and Jessica knew he was calculating his options. "He's paranoid," Lang said finally, his voice trembling. "He's been covering his tracks, erasing evidence. He's got a meeting coming up. It's big. He's trying to finalize a deal that will cement his power for good." Jessica leaned in closer. "Where is this meeting?" she asked, her voice sharp. Lang hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "It's at one of his properties downtown. The top floor." With the information in hand, Jessica and Michael knew they had to act fast. Foster was closing in on his final move, and they had to stop him before it was too late. The city skyline loomed in front of them, the lights flickering in the distance as Michael and Jessica prepared for their final move. They knew that this was the last chance to take Marcus Foster down. The meeting he had scheduled at his property downtown was not just about a deal. It was about securing his position and ensuring his empire would remain untouchable. "Jessica, we have to be careful," Michael said, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "Foster's got eyes everywhere. He won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who gets in his way. "I know," Jessica replied, her expression hardening. "But this time, it's not just about stopping him. It's about taking everything he's built down. If we don't act now, we might never get another chance." They arrived at the building. The tall, imposing structure that symbolized Foster's wealth and power. The entrance was guarded by two men in dark suits, their expressions unreadable. Jessica and Michael exchanged a quick look before moving forward. They had a plan: slip inside unnoticed, avoid confrontation, and get to the top floor where Foster would be meeting with his associates. The elevator was off limits to them, so they'd have to use the stairs, a risky move. But it was the only option. As they reached the service entrance, Jessica took a deep breath. "This is it. Stay focused." Michael nodded. They had trained for moments like this, quiet, methodical, and precise. Every step counted, every move mattered. Inside, they made their way through the service corridors, moving quickly and quietly. The building was eerily silent, save for the occasional hum of security cameras monitoring their every move. They reached the stairwell, and with one last look at each other, they ascended the stairs. At the top, they could hear the muffled sounds of a conversation. Foster was in there, with his associates, making deals that could ruin countless lives. This time, Michael and Jessica weren't going to let him walk away. They approached the double doors, their hearts pounding. With one final glance, they pushed them open, and the confrontation began. The room was dimly lit, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table at the center. The unmistakable scent of expensive leather mixed with the sharp tang of expensive whiskey filled the air. At the head of the table sat Marcus Foster, his hands resting neatly in front of him, his posture composed as if the world had never once tried to knock him down. His eyes, cold and calculating, flickered briefly when Michael and Jessica entered the room. There was a fleeting moment of surprise. But then his lips curled into a mocking smile. "Mr. Carter, Miss Green." Foster's voice was smooth, tinged with amusement. "I must say, you've managed to make quite the entrance. But I'm afraid it's a little too late. You see, everything I've built is already set in motion. No one is going to stop it, not even you." Jessica stepped forward, her eyes never leaving his. "We're not here to negotiate, Foster. We're here to put an end to everything you've built. It ends tonight." The two guards standing by the door tensed at her words. But Michael was already a step ahead. With a swift motion, he kicked a chair across the room, sending it crashing into the guard's legs. They were momentarily distracted, but it was enough. Michael rushed forward, disarming one of them and knocking the other to the ground with a sharp punch. Foster remained seated, his gaze unwavering. "You think this is going to work? You can't defeat me, Carter. You're just one man. What makes you think you can take everything from me?" "I'm not just one man," Michael replied, stepping closer to him. "I'm the one you underestimated. And now, I'm here to take back what you stole from me." Jessica moved to the side, ensuring that Foster couldn't escape. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the moment pressing down on them both. This was their final chance to bring him to justice. Foster's eyes narrowed, his hand inching toward the button on the table. It was a trap. He was calling for backup, trying to buy time, but Michael was ready. In one smooth motion, he reached out, grabbing Foster's wrist and twisting it, forcing him to drop the button. "You can't run, Foster," Michael growled, his grip tightening. "You're done. Your empire ends here." Foster let out a soft laugh, though it was tinged with desperation. "You think you've won? You've only scratched the surface. I've got connections everywhere. You'll never make it out of here alive." The room seemed to grow colder with each word Foster spoke. But Michael and Jessica were undeterred. They had come too far to back down now. The clock was ticking, and every second was crucial. "I don't need to survive, Foster," Michael said, his voice steady and cold. "I've already survived everything you've thrown at me. And now, it's your turn." With a final motion, Michael slammed Foster's hand onto the table, pinning him in place. It was over. The truth would come out. Foster's reign of terror had come to an end. The once imposing figure of Marcus Foster, the man who had ruled with iron fists, was now reduced to nothing more than a cowering figure at the mercy of those he had wronged. His usual cocky demeanor was gone, replaced by a mixture of fear and disbelief. The room, once filled with the echoes of his power, now felt small, suffocating. As the police officers moved in to secure the room, Jessica stood by Michael's side, her eyes never leaving Foster's slumped form. She had seen him at his most arrogant. But now, seeing him like this, broken, defeated, was a reminder of how far they had come. "You can't do this," Foster spat, his voice hoarse, his eyes wild. "I have connections. I own this city. You think a few cops are going to stop me? This isn't over, Carter." Michael's expression remained stoic as he watched the officers cuff Foster and prepare to escort him out of the room. "It's over, Foster," he said quietly. "You might have owned this city. But you didn't own the people. You didn't count on them fighting back." Foster struggled against the officers. But it was futile. His empire was crumbling, and with every move, he was being pulled deeper into the web of his own crimes. As they dragged him out of the room, Michael turned to Jessica. "We need to make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug. We've come this far, and now it's time to finish what we started." Jessica nodded in agreement. "I've already alerted my contacts. The evidence we have is more than enough to take down Foster's entire operation. This time, the truth won't be buried." The two of them exchanged a look that said everything. The battle was over, but the war for justice was far from finished. There would still be pieces of Foster's corrupt empire scattered across the city. And it was up to them to ensure that every last bit was rooted out. The hours that followed were a blur. Police raids, confiscated files, and arrests of Foster's loyalists were just the beginning. The city was waking up to the truth. And Marcus Foster's once untouchable grip on power was slipping away with each passing minute. Michael and Jessica watched from a distance as Foster's mansion, once a symbol of his wealth and influence, was surrounded by law enforcement. In the end, it wasn't the power he had accumulated that mattered, it was the lives he had destroyed in the process. And now, he would face the consequences. The days following Foster's arrest felt surreal for Michael and Jessica. The city, once under the shadow of Foster's power, was slowly waking up to the truth. However, the work wasn't finished. While Marcus Foster was locked away, his empire still had many loyalists scattered throughout the system, people who could continue his work if left unchecked. Jessica was on the phone constantly, contacting her trusted allies, coordinating with law enforcement, and digging deeper into the layers of Foster's operations. The files they had recovered from Haven Enterprises revealed more than they could have ever expected. Foster's reach was vast: corruption in the local police force, city officials, business owners, and even judges. "Michael, you need to see this," Jessica said one morning, her voice tense, her eyes scanning the new batch of files that had just come in. Michael walked over to her desk, his eyes scanning the screen. The documents laid out a network that stretched far beyond Foster's real estate deals. There were reports on illegal arms deals, money laundering, and secret meetings with powerful figures who were still free. Michael felt a surge of anger. Foster had been just the face of a much larger problem. And until every last one of his allies was held accountable, the job would never be done. "We had to go after them," Michael said, his voice grim. "Foster might be down, but his influence is still out there. We need to find these people before they regroup." Jessica nodded in agreement. "I've already reached out to some of my contacts. We're starting with the smaller players, the ones who are more likely to fold under pressure. But we'll need to move fast. These people are dangerous." The next few days were a whirlwind. Michael and Jessica worked tirelessly, piecing together the network. They tracked down one of Foster's former associates, a man named Leonard Hayes, who had been involved in many of the shady business dealings. Hayes had been a trusted advisor, but his greed had made him a target when he attempted to cut ties with Foster before the collapse. They found him holed up in a rundown apartment, surrounded by a small group of loyalists who were still protecting him. But it was clear that Hayes was on the run. He had lost his confidence, and fear had replaced the arrogance he once carried. "Come out, Leonard," Michael called, standing outside the building with Jessica. "It's over. You can make this easy or hard. But either way, you're not getting away from this." For a moment, there was silence. Then, the sound of footsteps approaching the door. Leonard Hayes appeared, his face gaunt and tired, his eyes filled with defeat. He had been a powerful man, but now, he was just another pawn in the game Michael had been playing for so long. "I didn't have a choice," Hayes said, his voice low, almost pleading. "Foster, he had people everywhere. If I didn't do what he said." "We know," Jessica said, stepping forward, "but it's over now. You can help us take down the rest of the people who are still out there. Or we'll hand you over to the police." Leonard paused, his gaze shifting between Michael and Jessica. He knew he was cornered. After a long pause, he finally nodded. "All right," he said, his voice resigned. "I'll talk." With Leonard Hayes' cooperation, Michael and Jessica were able to dig deeper into the underbelly of Elliot Foster's operation. Leonard had provided crucial intel about Foster's money laundering schemes, ties with illegal arms deals, and, most importantly, the network of individuals who had helped him maintain control. The more they uncovered, the more Michael realized just how deeply rooted the corruption was. Foster's reach didn't just extend to shady businessmen and gang leaders, it stretched into every level of law enforcement and politics. Creating a web so entangled that no one could be trusted, they spent days tracking down leads. But the deeper they went, the more dangerous their mission became. The corrupt officers and officials were desperate to protect themselves, and the pressure was mounting. One afternoon, as they sifted through more records, Jessica came across a name that immediately grabbed her attention: Detective Charles Monroe. Monroe was a seasoned detective, known for his ties to the highest echelons of city politics. He had worked with Foster on several occasions, and his name appeared in multiple payment logs and bribe records. He was part of the chain that kept the system intact, and with him still on the loose, Foster's empire would not be fully dismantled. "We need to find Monroe," Jessica said, her voice firm. "He's the key to everything. If we can take him down, we'll cripple the rest of Foster's network." Michael's jaw tightened. He knew that taking down Monroe wouldn't be easy. The detective was known for being ruthless, and he had the connections to make anyone who crossed him disappear. But there was no choice. This was the final step in their fight. They spent the next few days tracking Monroe's movements. It wasn't easy. Monroe was careful, always a step ahead, but the pressure was starting to show. He became more paranoid, more erratic. One night, they managed to pinpoint his location: a high-end penthouse in the heart of the city. Monroe had been hiding in plain sight, using his position to cover his tracks. "Tonight's the night," Michael said, his voice low as he watched the building from a distance. "We move in quietly. We can't afford any mistakes." Jessica nodded, her eyes narrowed in focus. "I've got your back. Let's end this." They made their move under the cover of darkness, slipping past the security guards and entering the building unnoticed. As they reached the penthouse floor, Michael's pulse quickened. This was it. They had to be precise. They crept to the door, and with one swift motion, Michael forced it open. Inside, Detective Monroe was sitting at a desk, papers scattered around him, his face tense as he read through the documents. He didn't hear them approach. Monroe's eyes flicked up in surprise when Michael entered. But before he could react, Michael had him at gunpoint. "Time's up, Monroe," Michael said coldly. "You're going to tell me everything. Now." Monroe's face twisted with anger and fear. "You think you've won? You're nothing. You don't know who I am. You have no idea what you're up against." Michael stepped closer, his voice low but filled with authority. "I know exactly who you are. And I know what you've been doing. I've been taking down every piece of Foster's empire. And now, it's your turn." Monroe hesitated, but Michael's relentless glare pushed him over the edge. Foster was never in control. Monroe spat. "I was. And you're too late. You can't stop what's already in motion. Tell me who's backing you," Michael demanded, his finger tight on the trigger. "Who's really behind this?" For a moment, Monroe stayed silent, his eyes flickering with calculation. Then, he sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," he muttered, "but you'll regret this." With Detective Monroe's confession, Michael and Jessica were finally able to connect the dots in their pursuit of Elliot Foster. The corrupt web that Foster had built stretched across every aspect of society, politics, law enforcement, business. But now, they had a chance to break it all down. Monroe's information confirmed everything they suspected. Foster had used his empire to manipulate, bribe, and destroy anyone who stood in his way. And the scope of his operation reached far beyond what they had initially anticipated. Monroe, now cooperating fully, explained the final pieces of the puzzle. "There's a meeting tomorrow," he said, his voice hoarse from fear and exhaustion. "Foster's pulling together his key players, big names, powerful figures. It's his last attempt to solidify his empire before everything falls apart. He's bringing in his allies from all corners, politicians, Gang leaders, businessmen. It's happening at his private estate on the outskirts of the city. Michael's mind raced as he processed the information. This was it, the culmination of their efforts. The meeting at Foster's estate would be the final battle. They needed to move quickly, but carefully. The last thing they needed was to tip Foster off. "Jessica," Michael said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to move in tonight. We can't let him gather his forces." Jessica nodded, her face hardening with determination. "We'll take down Foster's inner circle. We'll expose them for who they really are. The world will know what they've been hiding." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Michael gathered his equipment, tools for infiltration, a few weapons for protection, and most importantly, the recording device that would capture everything that happened at the estate. If Foster thought he could outsmart them, he was wrong. They were ready for him. That night, under the cover of darkness, they made their move. The streets were eerily quiet as Michael and Jessica navigated through the city. Heading towards the estate, the sprawling mansion loomed ahead, isolated from the rest of the city. Its security was tight, but nothing Michael and Jessica couldn't handle. As they approached the entrance, they observed the guards. A small patrol of armed men stood at various points around the estate. They weren't amateurs, but they were still just people who could be outsmarted. Michael and Jessica quickly and quietly neutralized the first few guards. Using their skills to avoid detection, they slipped through the shadows, moving closer to the main building. Once inside, Michael's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. Everything they had fought for, everything they had endured, had led to this moment. They needed to find Foster and expose him to the world. They reached the large conference room where the meeting was being held. Inside, they could hear the murmur of voices, important figures in the city. The people who had supported Foster for so long. The time had come to tear it all down. "Ready?" Jessica whispered, her eyes gleaming with determination. Michael didn't answer with words. He simply nodded. This was the endgame. The next few moments would decide everything. With one swift motion, Michael kicked the door open, revealing the group of men gathered around the table. Elliot Foster sat at the head, his usual calm demeanor replaced by tension as he looked up at the intrusion. For a moment, there was silence. "Gentlemen," Michael said, his voice cold and steady. "Your time is up. Elliot Foster is going down. And you're all coming with him." Foster's eyes narrowed, but he didn't show fear. He was a man who had manipulated and controlled for so long that he couldn't fathom losing it all. But Michael wasn't intimidated. "Who the hell do you think you are?" one of the men at the table sneered. "You think you can just waltz in here and bring us down?" "I don't think I know," Michael replied. "You're all part of a system that's been corrupt for far too long. And now, the world is going to see the truth." With that, Michael activated the recorder, capturing every word that was spoken. He knew this was the key to bringing down Foster for good. He had the evidence, the connections, and the proof. Now, it was just a matter of watching Foster's empire crumble. The room was tense as Michael and Jessica stood in the heart of the lion's den, surrounded by the men who had once been untouchable. Elliot Foster, his face pale and devoid of its usual smugness, sat back in his chair, his eyes darting nervously from one person to another. The truth was finally coming to light, and Foster's empire was crumbling faster than he could react. "Everything you've built, every dirty deal, every manipulated soul, is going to be exposed," Michael said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. His words felt like a promise, and the weight of them pressed heavily on everyone present. Foster remained silent, his expression hardening as the realization set in that his web of lies and corruption was no longer a secret. The room was silent, save for the sound of the recorder humming softly on the table, capturing every confession, every admission. "You should have walked away, Foster," Michael continued, his gaze unwavering. "But now you're going to lose everything." Foster stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by desperation. "You think you can bring me down with just a few words? I've built this empire from nothing. I've crushed people like you without a second thought. You'll never touch me." Jessica stepped forward, her voice steady and strong. "You underestimated the truth, and now, it's over." The two guards in the room seemed hesitant, unsure of what to do. They were loyal to Foster, but even they could see the writing on the wall. They exchanged a glance, and Michael could sense their hesitation. "You should listen to them," Michael said, his tone lowering. "This is your chance to walk away with your life. But if you fight, if you try to escape, things will only get worse for you." The silence in the room was thick, but it didn't last long. The door behind them swung open, and Detective Harris stepped in, flanked by a team of officers, all with their weapons drawn. They moved quickly and efficiently, surrounding Foster and his men. "This is it, Foster," Harris said, his voice commanding. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, attempted murder, and numerous other charges. You won't escape this time." Foster's face twisted with rage, but there was nothing he could do. His empire had collapsed, and with it, his power. The officers moved in, securing him and the other men in the room. As Foster was cuffed and led out of the room, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The fight was over. They had won, but there was still work to be done. The evidence they had gathered wasn't just going to bring Foster down, it was going to bring down everyone connected to him. The night of truth had arrived. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and everything they had worked for in silence was now laid bare for the world to see. Michael stood in the dimly lit courtroom, his eyes fixed on the faces of the jury, his heart steady but filled with a quiet anticipation. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The final reveal. Jessica walked to the front, holding a folder thick with documents and hard drives that contained everything. Every forged document, every bribed witness, every illegal transaction made by Elliot Foster and his associates. It was all there. They had been gathering this evidence for months, meticulously connecting the dots, following the money, finding the cracks in the web of lies that Foster had built. The room fell silent as the lead prosecutor, a calm and composed woman named Elizabeth Moore, began her presentation, with each piece of evidence displayed on the large screen behind her. The audience could feel the tension building. Photos of illegal arms deals, audio recordings of Foster ordering hits on his enemies, financial records that showed the vast network of money laundering, and most damning of all, a hidden video recording from one of Foster's own meetings, where he confessed to orchestrating the murder of Michael's father. Michael felt his pulse quicken as the images flashed before him. He had heard the rumors, felt the whispers, but seeing it all come together, seeing the proof, it was almost too much to bear. The murder of his father, the lies that had branded him a criminal, all of it was exposed. There was no escape for Foster now. The defense team tried to counter, claiming that the evidence was fabricated, that Michael and Jessica had staged everything to frame Foster. But the lies were too thin, too transparent. The jury could see the truth for what it was. It took less than an hour for the verdict to be read aloud. Guilty on all charges. Foster's face turned ashen, his usual arrogance replaced with pure terror. His empire crumbled, and with it, the power he had wielded over so many lives. His associates, who had once been so loyal, now turned on him, testifying against him in exchange for lighter sentences. The Black Vipers, the notorious gang he had controlled, was dismantled piece by piece, with its members either arrested or in hiding. As the bailiffs moved to arrest Foster, Michael felt an odd sense of peace. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, about clearing his name, about righting the wrongs that had haunted him for so long. Jessica stood beside him, her face still marked by the strain of their long battle. But she too felt the weight of victory. "It's over," she said softly. Michael nodded, the words barely able to form in his throat. It was finally over.